call to order the September meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission. Excuse me, is that on?
It is now. You
Okay.
can hear it now.
Okay. Can we have the roll call?
Oh, certainly. Candace Sullivan.
Present.
Molly Bales.
Present.
Jim Morrison.
Here.
Gregory Rush.
Here.
Trip Ure.
Here.
James Bisbee.
Here.
Tim Thompson.
Here.
Richard Parsons.
Here.
And Mark Vartner is excused. We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. My understanding is all of the items on the consent agenda are not prepared or here,
That's correct.
so I'll entertain a motion to remove the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded, we remove the consent agenda from the agenda. All in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, it's carried. I have some opening remarks. The Historic Preservation Commission is a public commission appointed by the City of New Bern's Board of Aldermen. It's responsible for preserving and safeguarding New Bern's historically designated historic districts, downtown and Riverside, based on U.S. Department of Interior standards, state statutes, city ordinances, and New Bern's historic guidelines. Two of the major tasks of the HPC include approving applications for certificate of appropriateness and preventing demolition by neglect of historic structures. HPC holds a quasi-judicial hearing, of this is one, on an application for a certificate of appropriateness. The Commission hears sworn testimony and evidence provided by the applicant, by parties who received notice of the hearing, and by others who can justify that they have relevant evidence and are directly affected by the application. The Commission cannot consider comments based on personal likes or dislikes, hearsay, or personal opinion that cannot be directly related to the specific historic guidelines. And likewise, commissioners will refrain from stating personal opinions, personal likes and dislikes, and hearsay during the hearing. We'll make our decisions based on the testimony and evidence provided. Can we hear the first application? Oh, you're going to swear in
we need to
presenters?
Swear people in, and then you have a
Okay.
second set.
Okay.
Okay, everyone who would like to speak this evening, please come forward and be sworn in. Anybody who's going to speak this evening? So please raise your right hand. Please swear to tell the truth to the best of your knowledge. Okay, then state your name and your address on how to vote.
You're on.
Okay, well, I think you have another portion of your introduction now. The summary of the hearing process.
Aha, the process
Yes, thank you.
we will follow. The HPC administrator will provide an overview of the application. The applicant or representative will present the application. Proponents and opponents will receive notice of the hearing. Whoever received notice of the hearing can present evidence. Rebuttal is allowed by the applicant and by proponents and opponents who receive notice. Others who can justify they have relevant information and will be directly affected can present evidence. The HPC administrator presents the staff's findings and recommendations. The applicant representative has the opportunity to make final comments on their application. Commissioners discuss the evidence and may ask for clarifications from the applicant or presenters. The chairman will call for a motion to approve or deny the application with stated findings of fact. The motion is discussed by the commission, and the chairman will call for a vote on the motion. The COA can be approved, approved with conditions, or denied.
Okay, all right. So our first application and only application for this evening is for 837 South Front Street, also known as Trent Court, and this is only for Area A of Trent Court. And this is a copy of their application, and this is the second page of the application, and you can see that they have signed and dated it. They've supplemented their answers with a third sheet, this sheet here, which you saw in your packet. Includes all those following descriptions of the actual project. And then they also have a map, which I now have to make small, so you can see the whole map. Here. And this map shows in the Trent Court neighborhood there, the buildings in gray are the ones that are being proposed to be demolished. It includes, starting from the river at the bottom, the administration building, and then off to the right, there are 6 that are horizontally aligned here, and then 2 that are vertically, and then the other on the left, the other 4 as well. So that is their demolition plan. Their application also includes their redevelopment plan. Oops. Oh, right. Which I guess I get to later. So we have here also photographs that they've submitted over the course of the last few months in preparation of their plan, and they've provided hundreds of photographs, and so I've summarized them or excerpted ones that highlight the essence of their photographs. So starting with the administration building, they show some interior shots. This is the entry foyer, and then this is a shot of the back, and in the bottom you can see, I'm going to make this a little bigger now. Bottom you can see some of the siding that's been ripped off by the flooding. The next one is a photograph in the crawl space underneath the building, showing the floor structure is a metal truss with metal pans and then covered by concrete, and all of that metal has rusted. There's another shot. You can see some of the metal is actually peeled off due to the rust. Those are just samples of photographs, and they've shown photographs inside the administration building here, where you can obviously see where the water level was here with mold, and then again here, and in the closets. Here's another one. This may be a bathroom. So then building A is the one that's across the street from the administration building, farthest to the east. And this is just a front elevation of it, building A. And this is one of the buildings that has one of the bas reliefs, or several of the bas reliefs. This is a photograph of one of them. This also shows the curvilinear edge to the cantilevered entry roof structure, as well as some other features like brickwork and some other things as well. So that's another entrance there. Here's another entrance for numbers 3 and 1. On the end, it also have an entrance for another unit on the end, again with the cantilevered overhang. But of note here is on the upper right, this is one of the buildings that has the mid-century modern windows on the corner, and Then this is a photograph of the left half of the back. A little bit different. The doorway roofs are more of a hip roof as opposed to a flat roof. They also use brackets and are not cantilevered. The window fenestration is different. All of the utilities and things are on the back here as well. This is the right-hand side, not so many utilities until you get towards the end. The roofs also have these semicircular vents for the attic. And then photographs of the inside of this, one of the units in this building, with the paint peeling here on the left. Then the kitchen in the back of the unit. And then another kitchen of another unit on the other side of that. And that was also a water heater there. This is a mechanical unit that was on the first floor. Then this is second floor bedroom and a bathroom. And you can see the mold all over. So B, the next one to the behind the A unit. It also has the bas-reliefs. And this is an example of one of the apartments there. Same unit. People personalized it with this red coloring and green coloring in the kitchen. And then also again the mechanical units for that. Here's going then into or a shot going to the crawl space. There were no shots actually under this crawl space, but just from this vantage point here. And you can see some of the issues with these insulated pipes here in the front. Unit C, there's a close-up of one of those mid-century modern corner window units. You may also be able to see there's potentially an issue with the corner having a different, brick is in a different plane above and below there. That may have been intentional, but I'm not sure. Buildings D and E and F were all similar, or I'm sorry, D and E were similar. This is building F. Also has the corner windows. And so it's similar to the others. Building G, this is the end of building G again with the corner window, the roof vent. This is then for building G, I believe. Did I just say that? Yes, building G. Okay, so and this is the first one, or the easternmost one, that is perpendicular to the river. The others were all parallel. And so you can see essentially the playground in the background on the right. And so this is these had to be, due to a slight bit of topography there, they had to be stepped down. And so these have two different levels. Building H was then the next one. Also, now in this case, this photograph is taken looking north with the river to the south behind the photographer. So this is the end facing the river. And that's that same unit, and we were just looking at the right side of this building. And the left side is the end facing the river. So you can see this is the front side, and the previous one was the back side. Right? Oops, sorry, this is the front side. Sorry. Now we're looking at a different building here, sorry. and again, the river's on the left anyway. And so they would tend to orient the fronts toward each other and the backs toward each other in pairs like that. Building J is the last one of those four. And this is, then the left side is facing the street and the right side is heading towards the river. So we're standing on that street between Trent Court and the former grocery store. And then this is the right end of that same building. Again, it has stepped down for the river, or for the topography towards the river. And this particular case, it has this end unit has an overhang that wraps or extends beyond the building with a post on the end. So. And then this is going around to the other side of that building J. And then up towards the road again on J. There are two other buildings farther in behind the first six. Building Y, and these are of the more newer, let's say, they're of the newer design. And so you can see these, although they're the fronts, they do not have, say, for example, the bas-reliefs. They have a brick fin between the doors. The cantilevers are straight and flat across the front. And the windows are triple windows on the front and double windows on the top. And the ends have, one end has a utility room of sorts with a chimney. Whereas on the previous designs that you may have noticed there were several chimneys within the body of the units. So then this is going around the utility end with the chimney, and the back is similar to what we had seen before, but with less utilities sticking out. And then this is the right side of that same building. And then lastly, A2 is the other one of those two more, the younger or newer designs. Left and right sides, left and right back, or at least left back. There's the full length of the back. And then the end on this one is just blank. Okay, and then, yes, this is their redevelopment plan. So once the proposed buildings are removed, they're proposing that the existing basketball court would stay, the existing playground would stay, and the existing parking lot would stay. The streets remain in their current alignment. A few of the sidewalks, the existing pathway which connects to the park would stay, the piers would stay, and most of the large, especially the large trees, but several of the other trees would also remain. And I'll scooch up a little bit here to catch the very top. So many of the large trees would remain. Okay, and that is their application. We have our zoning and inspections report that we do at this point, and you can see that they, oops, where is it? Oh no. Okay, I will have to find you the actual signed one. And then after that, we have our recommendations. So if you want to proceed, I will find that sheet while you proceed, and we'll come back to that.
My understanding is we don't yet have the SHPO information and their recommendation in terms of retention of one of these buildings.
Yes, that's one of the requirements in order for you to proceed with your process.
And you've talked with SHPO, and that could be forthcoming or would be forthcoming for the October meeting.
Yes, likely. Yes.
And I assume your thought is that we continue until the October meeting?
That would be one approach, yes.
Okay. Since that is a requirement, I would entertain a motion, we continue this item till the October meeting.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
the reason for that motion would be to obtain information.
To
the
obtain
required
information
from SHPO.
necessary to the part of the decision, which is retention of a building.
And that information would need to be incorporated into the motion you entertain.
Yes.
Can it be conditional?
I would not advise that, seeing as the HPC process requires you to consider SHPO's opinion before you render a decision as to the application for demolition.
Well, if we're going to continue, I also didn't see any discussion about identifying a building or how the salvaged individual heirlooms from those buildings would be used. Is that part of this application, to your knowledge?
So yes, in the description that they had, the extra page, I can go to those items. So item C, I'll make this bigger, sorry. Item C, removal and salvage of 34 cast bas-reliefs located in the exterior elevations of certain buildings to be demolished. Let's see. And well, I guess the drawing shows the various elements that I said would still remain. So,
The application does not include retention of a building.
that's correct.
Yeah.
It
That was-
proposes all 12 buildings plus the office building, 12 residential buildings and 1 office building to be demolished.
That was one of my questions. And then the other question was, I saw this, but maybe I'm not reading it fully, that they were going to submit at least a sketch of some of the ideas they had for the use of the reliefs, or a monument, or a memorial of some type. Is that part of this?
So there has been nothing like that submitted.
So to follow on that, one of my questions was, we had discussions about some of those bas-reliefs being in the open space,
Right,
and I didn't see any indications of where they might be located.
right.
Is there a motion to continue
Yeah.
for the purpose of obtaining the
I
SHPO
think that,
recommendation?
I think, we're just trying to get an idea of what is in the application before we, because if it's not here, then it's something we should advise that needs to be brought here.
Mhm.
And how long has JIPO had time to submit this to us? When did we notify them? How long?
So because of the complications of access to the building, it took several weeks before they could begin the process. So their 30-day clock has already started, so they should be able to produce that before the next meeting on October 18th.
So they've only had a 30-day window to review this?
That's their, I don't know if it's their internal requirement or state requirement, but it's always been understood that they are to provide within 30 days of a request.
I just have to ask, because 2 weeks ago you told us they were not going to.
Yeah, they were gonna be like,
They were not going to, and there were no statewide significant buildings in New Bern.
No, so that's a different thing, right? So we have 3 specific issues that we need to address. First is whether or not the structure qualifies as a contributing structure. in a locally designated historic
It's
district
on-
and
it's
is
on
50 years or
national
older,
register.
right? The second one is SHPO has determined whether the structure has statewide significance. And that was what I mentioned, was they have found in their records that there are no buildings in New Bern that are listed on their list of statewide significance. And then the third one is that SHPO is to evaluate the interior and exterior of the structure and provide a written evaluation and opinion on the architectural, historical, and cultural significance of the structure.
So you didn't say that John Wood had resigned and they were not going to come?
I don't think I said it as definitive, but rather that he did resign, and so it may be difficult for them to get someone to come.
But-
So,
but
but in
you've
the
now-
meantime, they've said someone will be coming. So, and so in the process, they were concerned about access into the buildings and the safety of that. And we were advised that that would not be, it would only be possible if third party was hired to provide the safety, the safe entry into the buildings. So we then opted to send them the photographs, the hundreds of photographs that I mentioned, for their review for the interiors. And then still they would be visiting the site for the exteriors. And so now that's a process that started about 2 weeks ago, and I ended up getting them the photographs about 3-4 days ago.
But we did ask for it at the last meeting.
That's correct, yeah.
And that's the first time we've ever asked for it? For them to,
For this project, you mean?
yeah, because it's been going on for a couple.
Yes, so so the specific timeline is the day or two after the last meeting, I sent the email requesting them to do this. They sent back an email stating that they needed a copy of the COA application. And then when I provided that, then they asked the question about the safety. And so then there was some discussion back and forth about that and what the potential solutions could be for them. And so it ended up taking another week or two to get that all ironed out. So now now we have the 30-day clock has already started for them, so that it will be by the next meeting, but it cannot be by, obviously, could not have happened by tonight.
Before we entertain a motion, can we see if the applicant has any additional information for,
Say that again. Sorry.
I'm asking a question, before we entertain a motion,
Mhm.
should the applicant introduce any additional information they might have? I mean, we've got questions
Well,
about a complete
Well,
application.
the question, it seems to be the question would be, does that place an undue hardship on the applicant to delay 1 more month?
I don't know if they have any.
Yeah, that's the
additional-
question I would pose to her.
Yes,
Yeah.
yeah. Does the does the applicant have any additional information they want to
If you have an
present?
answer, please come to the microphone.
And Mr. Chair, just as a point of clarity in the application, I think Ms. Askew is indicated as the property owner on the application. The owner of the property is the New Bern Housing Authority,
Mhm.
and Ms. Askew is its authorized representative as she is the executive director.
Okay.
I don't have any additional information, but I really just needed some clarity because I just listened to some of the things that you all pointed out that we needed to provide and we didn't provide, but I wasn't aware that you all needed some additional information because I truly would have been prepared and had it ready for you prior to now. My concern is that I just heard you mention that SHPO was requesting that we keep a building, and that was never a part of any discussion with them. For the most part, that was only in discussion with you all. So I was under the impression that that decision would come from you and not from the state agency. So I just kind of really need to have clarity on that point that you all made. And then also, I heard you mention that you would like to see what we plan to do with the bar release. I wasn't aware of that either because we would have tried to put something together for you to see. We just mentioned that we would reuse those in other places so that they can be still seen, and we would maintain the use of those. So I just really want to make sure that we provide you all everything that you do need. And the hardship for the agency would be that I resign on Friday, and I've been working on this for 2 years, and I really want you all to have everything that you need prior to leaving. So if I could know tonight exactly what you need, so that I can make sure you have that before I go.
Did you get a copy of the staff recommendation?
Did you,
Yes.
So, I mean, there were some,
Well,
there
I
were
gave you
some,
the link, I gave you the link to it.
for the recommendation?
there were some things that you might want to respond to,
Okay.
some of the recommendations. Is there any financial issue with a delay?
The financial issues that we do have, if we are required to keep that building, the agency will be responsible for maintaining it, and we operate based on a subsidy that's provided to us from HUD. And if that building is something that we have to keep, they will not provide assistance for us to be able to do that, which would definitely put a hardship on the agency because
Yeah, I guess, really, is there a hardship from delaying, however? I mean,
On delaying it?
We're not into.
the hardship would be for me because I'm not gonna be here, but
So there's
you know,
no,
and it'll be hard for the agency to be able to find somebody with the work and the knowledge that I have to be able to put that in because, I mean, that person that will come may not be able to have what you need by October because they're not familiar with what's going on.
but is there a hard deadline of you have to have this in by X date?
There actually was quite lengthy discussion about the building and where it would be and how it would be utilized. And if not in the Part A, then identified where there were question marks when we had these discussions. So those question marks, I think, were what was being put out there, and then the solutions would be what you would bring to us for those question marks.
So I want to first address your comments related to the bar releases and the monuments. And so kind of going back to the application itself, one of the things when we left the meeting, you're absolutely correct, we had lengthy discussion around putting something back on the property. What we looked at based on the requirements of the applications, I think it's twofold, and I want to make sure we're comparing apples to apples. So what we tried to do, as Tiffany alluded to, is we tried to meet the requirements within the application of COA and submit that to you all. You're absolutely correct. Part of the MOA that would be developed and signed off on between SHPO, the housing agency, and the city would incorporate what those specific things would be related to what would go back, using those VAR releases, whether it goes on buildings, whether it goes in the park, all of those things. So that goes into the MOA that we would have signed off on between the city, SHPO, and the housing agency. So we looked at that requirement as the second part of what we submitted in an application. So as Tiffany indicated, if we knew that that also needed to specifically be a part of the COA application, we would have included it, but we worked off of that would be included in the memorandum of agreement. The other question related to the hardship, we have a call with FEMA tomorrow, which has been postponed. If you all remember from the last meeting, the discussion was around FEMA's interpretation as well as SHPO's interpretation that the city was not willing to move forward with the demolition. We cleared that up at the previous meeting, that we were all in agreement that that was not the case. We've articulated that back to FEMA based on that previous meeting with you all. Everybody is on board and is happy based on that information. So what SHPO did is move the meeting, the follow-up meeting, to tomorrow, because the expectation was at this meeting we would get the approval for the demolition, and whether or not, which the biggest contingent was whether or not a building would be required to be kept or not kept. That was the only thing that was really outstanding based on that communication. So what we were looking for is FEMA was hoping that we would be able to provide them tomorrow with the approval from tonight. They would then take that approval. They requested that we not submit that directly to SHPO, that we submit it to FEMA, and then FEMA's representative would work with the SHPO to be able to draft requirements going forward. But that communication would go between FEMA and SHPO. But as Tiffany alluded to, we had no indication from SHPO all along that they're concerned, and as you all indicated tonight, there's no contributing factors that there's any historic building that's of significance from SHPO standpoint within the New Bern area. So I don't see where they probably would come back and have a requirement necessarily for a building.
Well, we don't know.
We don't know, but our hope is otherwise. But what we were hoping for is to get a definitive answer tonight as far as your vote up or down on the demolition and whether or not a building needed to be kept. You're correct. We submitted an application, as our desire has always been from day one, and that is not to keep one of those damaged buildings. However, we, in previous discussions, we did say if you were going to require one to be kept, that then it would be Building J. As Tiffany indicated, HUD has indicated, as well as FEMA has indicated to us as well, that even if potentially monies are given to restore the building, no funding will be provided on an ongoing basis to maintain those buildings. So I know your requirement is not that you can require somebody to maintain it. Financially, as Tiffany indicated, it does put a hardship on the agency because as all of these buildings are demolished and new funding is available from FEMA and other things to facilitate the rebuilding of those units, they won't have HUD funding tied to
I
it.
think that I'd encourage you to put that together if this gets delayed, to put that response together.
Okay.
Because this board will decide that question.
Sure.
SHPO, I guess, is talking to you from two different perspectives. Scheduling the meeting for tomorrow, you're telling us,
Well, FEMA is, not SHPO.
you said SHPO scheduled their meeting as well.
No, FEMA has scheduled their meeting with us tomorrow. We
Oh,
pushed
okay.
it back to tomorrow based on this
Yeah,
because the
misunderstood.
next,
Sorry.
the next phase for FEMA was everybody's waiting on this demolition approval.
So I can't speak for everyone, and I see a chicken and egg coming here. But I can tell you my position, and I think I've shared it with you several times. I think it's important to me. Well, I know it's important to me. I have a suspicion it may be important to others. I hear Ms. Candace kind of speaking what I was prepared to say tonight. But it's important to me that we identify a building to save, and it needs to be part of the application. Now, granted, I hear you. I know you don't want to do that, and if you were given the choice, you would elect not to do that. But I anticipate a deliberation of this board when we're in a position to act, to get the thumbs up or thumbs down you're looking for.
I had my notes. There is an opposite position to that.
Yeah, and I think you saw that at our last design review meeting. We actually had a very engaging conversation that asked some very important questions that hadn't been revisited since you took off on this journey. That's you're 4 or 5 years into it now, and so it wasn't until Jim asked me that question that I realized that I'm the only guy who was around 4 or 5 years ago, apparently, when these preliminary discussions were had. And so, by no means are we bound to a previous board's desires, because you're here now in front of this board. But there's obviously some things we have to iron out amongst ourselves that we can't tell you what the outcome will be ahead of time.
And I think the
So-
rationale that we talked about was that when we're talking about demolishing that number of buildings, that there really needs to be a nod to the fact that we demolished that many buildings. And this contingency or this provision, that there would be some type of a I don't want to create your scenario, right? But there was talk about, do we make it a shelter and just an open house with, I mean, there was this discussion.
Sure.
And the rationale is not to make it difficult or more hoops to jump. It's simply to make a nod to the fact that there's a lot of buildings being demolished, and what solutions do we bring, for that? And so that was definitely a discussion that we had.
No, I wasn't discounting that. It wasn't a discussion.
Understood.
I was just sharing.
So in an effort to help,
Right.
I'd say building L. Okay, and But this is your project and your application, and by all means, it's up to you to decide how you would, which building you think might be appropriate should the board determine that you need to save one.
In all fairness, to your point, and I just, again, for clarification, the agency submitted their application to this body based on their request, which was not to keep a building. I'm not trying to tell you your job.
Yeah.
Your
I understand.
responsibility, based on the application, we assumed was you then would determine if that application that we submitted to keep no building, you all would then require back to us if we needed to keep a building. But our application, based on our preference, was not to keep a building.
Correct.
Yeah, I hear you.
That's right.
And maybe your answer is we don't intend to keep a building, and so that's why that's not identified in the application, and I get that.
That's right. And that's why I said, is
Okay.
our application is submitted to not to keep one. However, if this body requires one to be kept, and that's the vote, then we have no choice but to do it. But I want to be fair based on the agency. The agency
Sure.
submitted to not keep a building.
I got you, so,
And that building is our decision, it's not a SHPO issue, really.
Correct. That's right. And that's what when Tiffany was alluded to, when we heard that SHPO was making a decision on the building, we wanted clarification because SHPO has not been involved or required to keep a building. That only discussion has occurred at this local.
They're making an opinion on the historical value of all of those buildings.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
And which could influence our choice of do we want to save one.
Yes, sir. And again, on back, I'm not speaking for the board and the agency, with the exception of we're willing to adhere to your vote and your requirements. However, our application, preference-wise, was not to keep a building.
so, Mr. Chairman, without stepping on your toes here, but it sounds like we need to come back to design review again, if you don't mind, just to talk about how that's going to work procedurally. I don't suggest we get into that tonight, but you might want to have that discussion with us.
Keep or not keep, because, so we can move forward at that.
Well, I think there's a limitation on, a denial of an application creates some problems, and we want to make sure we don't fall into that trap where you can't do anything.
Yeah.
So essentially, what the strategy you're using, which is a valid one, and again, I understand, without getting into the details and the rehash, if it were me, I would make a motion to deny your application, and assuming it flies, that could create some major problems for you. So
But we can't give you an answer at that design review. We can only talk.
Yeah.
So
So basically, what you're saying is you're
I
gonna
think we have
talk
talked,
and recommend, and then we should just,
we have talked a lot. I'd say read
do
his
another
recommendation,
application based on what we
the
think
staff
we want.
recommendation, I think will outline for you.
I think you can accomplish what you want to accomplish without going down that path and still have a definitive answer at the end of a hearing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think you could have had an answer tonight without SHPO delaying.
Can it be conditional?
I think we were prepared to give you an answer. And so this SHPO is new to me. I don't know if it's new to everybody.
New to me as well.
And you don't
The
recommend
SHPO
doing it
information
conditional?
is not keeping a specific building, it's part of our
No, but the
process.
fact that they've now, from what I
Yeah.
understood at design review until
Yeah.
what I hear tonight,
Yeah.
is SHPO now does want to comment.
They want to comment, yeah.
Yeah, that has been changed.
Yeah.
And that is a big
Yeah.
change.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
So
So,
just for clarification, because I've heard a couple of different things. The application has been submitted. You all are waiting on SHPO's response, and then action will be taken based on the agency's application on a vote or up or down, without having to go back through a protracted process. Is that correct?
I think that's correct, but you don't want to submit an application that gets denied.
Mr. Chair, in the spirit of being helpful, I think the gentleman is correct, that at this juncture, this body is required to consider SHPO's input as to their evaluation of interior and exterior structures and their opinion about architectural, historical, and cultural significance of each of the structures in the application.
Yeah.
Once this body receives SHPO's assessment of each of the structures contained in the application and their value or lack thereof, you all can reflect upon that information, consider the application as it's submitted, and entertain evidence, competent evidence, and then make a decision based on the competent evidence contained in the record, whether that is for, against, or with conditions.
Yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong,
That's exactly right.
a
Exactly.
condition might well be about another building.
A condition would have to be some reasonable condition that's germane to the project that is substantiated by the competent evidence contained in the record.
And in the staff recommendation, you will see a proposed motion like that.
And I think the agency was prepared for that, as she indicated. That's all we're asking, is we submitted it, you all to go through your process, and then we're bound by your
They
decision.
should always submit what you want, not what we
And
want.
that's what we did. And so, and that's why I said, we're bound by your decision after that, but we submitted what we did. Okay?
Okay?
Thank you.
Okay.
Frustrating.
The question is, do I have a motion to continue based on our lack of SHPO input into the process, articulated very well by our
I
attorney?
do think it should go for the record that this is new information to this body. This is since our last
Yeah.
meeting.
Yeah.
So we're responding to information we all did not have at the last meeting.
Right, right.
I'll move that we continue until next meeting.
I think Mr. Parsons' motion is that he moves to continue the application for 837 South Front Street to the October regular scheduled meeting of the Historic Preservation Commission to be held in the City Hall courtroom to obtain additional information from the State Historical Preservation Office.
Thank you, Mayor. That's
Yes, sir.
exactly right.
Is there a second for that motion?
Second.
Moved and second to continue until the October meeting. All in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries. You want to
Couldn't see some time right now, since
Think-
I got every false reference I could possibly get.
have Matt follow up.
Yeah.
It just is.
Okay, we have no other applications to consider.
That's correct.
Okay, what else do we have? No old business, any public comments? We're losing our public. Does this gentleman have a comment?
No, sir, I'm here for the meeting, I'm working with Matt Shelley on the
Oh, okay. Okay,
Okay, welcome aboard.
welcome.
Welcome.
And his name is Robert.
He needs to.
We're usually better than this.
Yeah, we're making a little sausage tonight, I
Yeah.
guess.
Seems like there's a lot of moving pieces on this particular
Yeah.
case.
All right.
2018. What?
New business, none. Anything to discuss under your report?
None from me.
Okay. Any comments by the commissioners?
So we're moving along like a herd of turtles on this, right?
Okay, motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved and seconded, we adjourn. All in favor, state aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.
That was Greg that did the, Greg, did you do the motion to adjourn?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Jim.